This year, 2024, marks, believe it or not, the 40th anniversary of the release of James Cameron's The Terminator. I know, can you believe it? 40 years ago. Now, The Terminator had an original budget of $4 million, and it was increased to $6.5 million, and it came from Hemdale and Pac Western Productions and Eurofilm Funding, and Cinema 84 have been credited as some of the producers on that film. But Terminator went on to gross on a $6.4 million spend on its production. It made almost $79 million in 1984. So for a low budget, and it was considered a low budget B movie. Of course, this followed up Conan the Barbarian, and Arnold, famously wasn't the first choice of James Cameron, but it got made. It was a big hit. So that was in 1984. Cut to 1991. In the summer of 1991, Terminator 2 came out. Terminator 2 was budgeted at over $100 million. It was the first $100 million movie. And it was made pretty quickly. And it, in 1991, it grossed over half a billion dollars. It was the number one film of that year, of 1991. And at the time, it was the third highest grossing film of all time at the time. Now, why is this important? This is important because it talks or speaks to the life cycle of a motion picture. Now, the life cycle of a motion picture, it used to be that a movie would come out and, it would play theatrically and make its money, and that was it. And then you had television, so a movie could go on TV, and big budget movies would generate more advertising revenue, but still, you'd play a movie on television once. It might be tonight on the ABC Sunday Night Movie. It'd be a big thing. But with the advent of home video and cable television, you had home box office, you had HBO and Showtime, home box office and Showtime, and then there was other local channels like here, Z Channel in Los Angeles was very successful started in the 70s. I think it predated HBO and Showtime. But they were different. So what ended up happening was movies and then home video came along, and people could rent movies, people could buy movies. So there was a whole new ecosystem of movies. Now, I did a show on our Let's Get Physical Media show this past week. I did a show, and I broke down how much certain titles made, not just once they came out of the theater, what did they make in all of their ancillary markets. And it used to be like a movie like The Lion King grossed on home video and downloads and $850 million after it was already in the theaters. So home video added an incredible amount on cable and all those ancillary markets, added a ton of value and generated massive quantities of revenue. One movie made $850 million after it got out of the theater. So movies used to have, and because of the advent of home video, the revenues of studios exploded. But in the case of The Terminator did very well theatrically for a $6.5 million movie, made, almost $80 million worldwide, very respectable. But after The Terminator came out, they had other analytics. You had home video, exploded on home video, huge on cable. So the $78 million plus that it grossed theatrically was only one part of the picture. And they could look at home video numbers, which in a lot of cases exceeded the amount that the film made globally. So they could tell that a movie was even more valuable, which is why somebody decided to spend $100 million making Terminator 2, which was like, who would have ever thought that would have happened? Now, James Cameron, after he made Terminator, he made Aliens, he made The Abyss, and he was basically starting with The Abyss, he was doing R&D for the entire industry. The whole pseudopod sequence, the snaking alien tentacle, was what led to the technology that he had developed with ILM to do the T-1000, Robert Patrick's liquid metal T-1000. So James Cameron, starting in the 80s with The Abyss, was pioneering new technology. So that was part of what he was doing too. He was making up shit that didn't even exist. And he was doing that for the whole industry. Everything Cameron created kind of filtered down into the industry. But the Terminator is a good example of something that did well theatrically, but because it became a beloved film and it was watched for another half decade before they greenlit Terminator 2. So everybody who liked movies, everybody in Hollywood, everybody around the world knew what the Terminator was and loved it. So it was given a green light at $100 million to make the sequel. And of course, that movie, biggest movie of the year, and it made $500 million. And at the time, people were like, $100 million? What? How are you going to make that money back? So it was crazy, crazy money that was being spent. Nowadays, part of the problem with Hollywood and part of the problem with those economics, those analytics, they're all askew now. With the demise of, and as much as I love my physical media and still buy movies, over the last 20 years, mostly 15 years, as streaming has risen, especially over the last decade, with streaming, people don't have to buy movies anymore because you can see what you want on streaming. The problem is, streaming, like everything else in the new world we live in, everything is based on analytics. You're looking at analytics. So ultimately, what you're going to wind up with is the top 10% or 20% of all the movies that get made are the ones that are going to be constantly in rotation. Classic films suffer, unless you're promoting that you have classic films, and you have to movies still need to be marketed. Our film Tango Shalom, well, not just because it's a movie about Jewish culture and interfaith dialogue, no one is watching it. So I've been asked by our distributor to do what I can on social media to bolster. And I was like, look, who knew how many people hate Jews? I'm like, I'm sorry. I spent 5 years of my life making a little comedy that's supposed to promote interfaith relationships between different religions, and look what happens. But I've been asked to do that. The thing is, movies are only as valuable as the availability of them. So what ends up happening is if people don't know a movie's there, they're not going to watch it. And unless it's picked up by the algorithms, it's not going to be recommended to you, even if you might want to see it. So the world is in a different place, and movies they're not making the kind of ancillary money that they used to. A movie that was made for $6.5 million that grossed $80 million at the theater is not going to be making hundreds of millions of dollars the way they used to when the DVD realm was at the height of, DVD was a license to print money. And what, if you remember, if you're a fan of, say, Italian Giallo cinema or Dario Argento movies, DVDs allowed all of these international cult films to get remastered. When I was a kid in high school, if you could get a copy of Suspiria on a bootleg VHS tape, it didn't matter if you could barely see it. If you had it, it was like, oh my God, I've got Suspiria. Or, you got the American release of Lucio Fulci's The Beyond, 7 Doors of Death. Even though it was cut to shit, it was like, oh my God, I've got The Beyond. You get all excited. The DVD market made it so everything was so cheap and people were buying so many movies that we got all kinds of things. You had companies that were only doing laser discs, like Elite or Blue Underground, were moving over, and you were getting all kinds of crazy releases from people like Anchor Bay and William Lustig's Blue Underground and all that. It was just made it all. Every movie was coming out. There was a market for movies. Everybody would buy them. That has changed. And with analytics-driven movies, what ends up happening is that if a movie, for instance, is made for streaming, like, for instance, Beverly Hills Cop AF, Beverly Hills Cop Axel F is what it's called, but it's Beverly Hills Cop AF. That movie's going direct to Netflix. The only money that the new Beverly Hills Cop movie will make will be whatever they decide, however many people watched it its first month on Netflix. The movie, I don't know how much it costs, but for the sake of argument, let's just say it costs $50 million. Probably costs a lot more, but let's just say it costs 50. That $50 million is never going to be recouped. It's not going to generate. It will make zero money. Now, they'll have to decide: do we get new subscribers? Does it keep our subscribers at Netflix? Which we're going to get into Netflix in a minute. But does it make any money? And the answer is no. It doesn't. It only makes money if you get new subscribers, but new subscribers are not just attributable. It's not like Kansas City Chiefs Dolphins game where they can be like, wow, we had 2.5 million people subscribe to Peacock just to watch that football game. That you can say, okay, cause and effect, you got that. But movies, you can't point to one movie and say a streaming service can't say this is how many subscribers we got because of that. I mean, we get to hang on to our subscribers, but basically, whatever the sunk cost is into a film, you're never going to get it back. So, and what's interesting, if you go with me on this one, so there was a thought, like Netflix, they thought, okay, we'll spend $200 million on a movie like Red Notice, or $220 million on a movie like The Gray Man. You got the Russo brothers, you got two great actors in The Gray Man, but you're spending $220 million? That money's gone. And there's no theatrical release, which they probably should have, but that's not their business model. But what movie did even better than those movies did? Jennifer Lopez's $40 million movie, The Mother. Same amount of time. So why are you spending $200 million or $220 million trying to make movies that would normally get a theatrical release when you're never going to get that money back? It doesn't make any sense. And it's because in the streaming world, people are still trying to figure out this whole thing. And it turns out they couldn't figure it out because they're not making money. They're not making the kind of money that they were going to make. Which brings me to the first part of tonight's show. Allow me to read this breaking news about Roadhouse. That's right, the Jake Gyllenhaal Roadhouse reboot, directed by Doug Liman, who directed, of course, Swingers, directed the first Bourne movie, directed Mr. and Mrs. Smith, directed the great Tom Cruise science fiction film Edge of Tomorrow, if you don't recognize that, Live, Die, Repeat, or what it should have been called, All You Need Is Kill, because that was the original name of the manga that it was based on. But anyway, Doug Liman, according to Deadline today at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Doug Liman says, now let me just point out, I don't know what you guys who are watching now, what you think about Roadhouse, but I would say that Roadhouse is the kind of movie, it's been a lot longer, everyone's seen Roadhouse. Dalton, everyone knows that Patrick Swayze played Dalton. Everyone's seen Roadhouse. It's not, I don't think it's a great movie, but it's one of those movies that everybody remembers and everyone likes. So they're remaking Roadhouse, and it has a tie into UFC. So based on something like Top Gun Maverick, 35 years or something have gone by from the original to when it was released, Roadhouse is the kind of movie like Terminator 2 was. It had a beloved film in front of it that everyone had seen. Roadhouse, people have been seeing it for decades. You've got generations of people. And they have the tie-in with the UFC. And if there was ever a movie that you could promote the shit out of and it would generate interest to go see it at the box office, I would dare say that every dude from like 20 to 70 would probably go to the theater, maybe not 70, but would go to the theater to see Roadhouse. Especially because Jake Gyllenhaal looks like a monster in it. But it's not going to theaters. It's going direct to Amazon streaming. Here's a movie that I would be willing to bet, if it's good, it has to be good. If it's good, but you got Doug Liman. I mean, he's not a guarantee, but for the most part, he's made a lot of, and when he's working, this is kind of in his wheelhouse. When it goes on to Amazon, it's going to make $0. Now, it might get people to come sign up for Amazon Prime. Even Amazon's laying people off. They're spending all this money and they're wondering, how do we make money? They even have Amazon Studios. They've been nominated for Academy Awards, yet their Roadhouse remake is bypassing theatrical altogether. I think that's foolish. And I think that speaks to, because there's probably nobody at Amazon Studios that is thinking, there's this huge audience for this movie that might run out and see it opening weekend. It could be a huge hit. I would imagine this movie is going to be a huge hit. But let me read this article that was in Deadline today, because it sort of speaks to the time. And I come down on the side of director Doug Liman here. Director Doug Liman says he's boycotting the South by Southwest premiere of his Jake Gyllenhaal film Roadhouse to protest Amazon MGM bypassing theaters for Prime streaming release. First of all, why are you promoting a movie at South by Southwest if you're just going to put it on streaming? What I don't understand is any money this makes in the theater, I mean, assuming you market it effectively and you don't have to spend tons of money, it's found money. I mean, at least try and recoup your what it costs to make the movie and whatever you're going to spend on marketing, which a lot of people, are they going to know that Roadhouse is even on Amazon Prime? But anyway, editor's note. By the way, this article is actually by Doug Liman himself. Director Doug Liman has written this, but there's an editorial note at front, right up here. Editor's note. From his breakout in Swingers to The Bourne Identity, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Edge of Tomorrow, American Made, and his upcoming film with Tom Cruise they plan to shoot in outer space, Doug Liman's films have kinetic energy. That made the director perfect for Roadhouse, an edgier version of the 1989 beloved B-movie that starred Patrick Swayze, Kelly Lynch, Sam Elliott, and Ben Gazzara. Jake Gyllenhaal, who got back in similar chiseled mode he displayed in the boxing movie Southpaw, plays the bouncer who has never lost a fight. Lyman feels his movie, which has been selected as the South by Southwest opening night film and has been KO'd by Amazon MGM Studios with a Prime Video release, and he's not taking it lying down. In this guest column, he explains what happened, why he feels betrayed, and why this is a cautionary tale for a theatrical film business still recovering from the pandemic and the rise of streamers. Buckle up. This is Doug Liman, the director. When Roadhouse opens the South by Southwest Film Festival, I won't be attending. The movie's fantastic, maybe my best, and I'm sure it will bring the house down and possibly have the audience dancing in their seats during the end credits. But I will not be there. My plan had been to silently protest Amazon's decision to stream a movie so clearly made for the big screen. But Amazon is hurting way more than just me and my film. If I don't speak up about Amazon, who will? So here we go. When Amazon bought MGM, one of the few remaining studios making big commercial films for theatrical release, movies like Bond and Creed, they announced that they would put $1 billion into theatrical motion pictures, releasing at least 12 a year. They touted it as the largest commitment to cinemas by an internet company. I can tell you what they then did to me and my film Roadhouse, which is the opposite of what they promised when they took over MGM. The facts. I signed up to make a theatrical motion picture for MGM. By the way, he probably signed a deal. His directing deal guaranteed him a theatrical release. It's part of your deal. I signed up for a theatrical picture for MGM. Amazon bought MGM. Amazon said, make a great film and we'll see what happens. I made a great film. We made Roadhouse a smash hit. Amazon's words, not mine, by the way. Roadhouse tested higher than my biggest box office hit, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It tested higher than The Bourne Identity, which spawned 4 sequels. I'm told the press release has been Amazon's best since they bought MGM. Roadhouse has a strong tie into the UFC, which has a rabid and loyal fan base that has spawned over 1.5 billion social media impressions for the film. And marketing hasn't even started yet. The action is groundbreaking, and Jake Gyllenhaal gives a career-defining performance in the role he was born to play. Audiences will want to see UFC megastar Conor McGregor take his debut swing at Jake on the big screen. The reality is, there's nothing quite so fun as a good bar fight. What else could I have delivered to the studio? Nothing, as it turns out, because contrary to their public statements, Amazon has no interest in supporting cinemas. Amazon will exclusively stream Roadhouse on Amazon Prime. Amazon asked me and the film community to trust them and their public statements about supporting cinemas. And then they turned around and are using Roadhouse to sell plumbing fixtures. Because that's what Amazon Prime is. It's shipping. All this is window dressing to get you to pay for Amazon Prime so they get your, $175 a year now, to ship stuff. So movies are a loss leader, which theoretically means you can write off the entire cost of making movies as a business expense for marketing your service. I don't quite know how all that works, but that's what I would do. That hurts all filmmakers and the stars of Roadhouse who don't share in the upside of a hit movie on a streaming platform. Usually, for those who might be curious, you get box office bumps when you're an actor or a director, above-the-line people. If a movie makes a certain amount of money, you get a financial bump. You get a bonus. And that's built into your contract. So I don't know how this works, but when Amazon bought MGM, the company that owns Amazon, or the company that owned them, that Amazon becomes a new company that owns MGM. So are there deals? Do they have, I mean, it's nebulous. I don't get all the ins and outs of all that, but they'll figure something out. They don't have to pay people. Hollywood's really good at that. So regardless, as he goes on to say, that hurts the filmmakers and stars of Roadhouse who don't share in the upside of a hit movie on a streaming platform. Make no mistake, a movie on a streaming platform makes no money. There's nothing attributable to the box office of a movie if it goes on to streaming. There is no box office. There is zero, because they don't want the movie to have box office. It seems counterproductive. I would say this, and we say this on the John Campea show all the time. A movie, regardless of what it is given added value if it has a theatrical run. A movie that only appears on streaming has no value. It has no value to the audience other than something, oh, this looks good, I'll watch this. If a movie comes out and does well theatrically, and people talk about it, it will forever have added value you can't get any other way. Because if something is only on streaming, that's all it ever will be. But if it came out theatrically, it has that extra added cachet, which gives it more value when it comes to a streaming service. Because if Roadhouse is unique to Amazon Prime, which it is, well, people are going to say, oh, I got to get Amazon Prime. I didn't get to see Roadhouse when it was in the theaters. I'm going to sign up for it at Amazon Prime. That is my opinion. I will die on that hill. If a movie comes out theatrically and does well, even if it doesn't do so well, if people know it came out, like a movie like Poor Things, gets Oscar nods, came out theatrically. I don't know which streaming service owns it, but it's going to have more cachet when it goes on to streaming because it has a life before it got to streaming. It's been given added value that you can't get any other way. Well, Roadhouse, by going direct to streaming, if it kicks ass and it's a total crowd pleaser and people are going to watch Jake Gyllenhaal and Conor McGregor fight in a theater and they're screaming and yelling and cheering, you can't pay for that kind of publicity. Anyway, that hurts the filmmakers and stars of Roadhouse who don't share in the upside of the hit movie on a streaming platform. And they deprive Jake Gyllenhaal, who gives a career best performance, the opportunity to be recognized come awards season. See, it always jumps. I hate when it does that. Sorry. If we don't put tentpole movies in movie theaters, there won't be movie theaters in the future. Movies like Roadhouse, people actually want to see on the big screen, and it was made for the big screen. Without movie theaters, we won't have the commercial box office hits that are the locomotives that allow studios to take gambles on original movies and new directors. Without movie theaters, we won't have movie stars. Film executives are also at risk. Box office revenues are the war chests that allow studios the resources to make movies. It's no surprise you see layoffs across the industry, including at Amazon. Without movies in theaters, there's no revenue coming in. And once the theaters go out of business, it could take decades for the business to recover, if ever. At the height of the pandemic, there was a real possibility that movie theaters would not recover. We got comfortable watching movies at home. But then a remarkable thing happened when restrictions lifted. We started going back to the movie theater. The fact that we still have movie theaters after the global pandemic didn't happen by accident. It happened because brave filmmakers like Chris Nolan and Tom Cruise insisted their movies play in the theater, and they proved audiences are still there. They proved that despite everything, we still enjoy gathering and sharing in the communal experience of watching a film together. People love going to the movies, despite the convenience of streaming. They are not mutually exclusive. In fact, data shows that movies do better on streaming if they've been released theatrically first, clearly. And we're going to get into that in a different story later. I'm not opposed to streaming movies. I made one of Amazon's first original movies for streaming, and during the pandemic sold a streaming movie to Warner Brothers. I'm currently making Instigators for Apple. But I am opposed to Amazon gutting MGM and its theatrical business, as I would have had Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post and then gutted its newsroom. He did the opposite. I like the Amazon film execs, and I believe they're good people who are trying to do their best. They have a lifetime of experience making and releasing films in theaters. We tried everything to convince them to put Roadhouse in theaters. They know all the arguments I presented here. I even asked them to allow me to sell Roadhouse to another studio that would put it in theaters. They said no. Maybe they are victims of this as well, forced to betray the artists they spent their careers supporting. The reality is, there may not be a human villain in this story. It may simply be an Amazon computer algorithm. Amazon will sell more toasters if it has more subscribers. It will have more subscribers if it doesn't have to compete with movie theaters. A computer could come up with that elegant solution as easily as it could solve global warming by killing all humans. But a computer doesn't know what it is to like to share the experience of laughing and cheering and crying with a packed audience in a dark theater. This is a great point. And if Amazon has its way, future audiences won't know either. I'm sorry, but I'm right there with Mr. Lyman. Analytics cannot explain or tell you what human beings like. It can only predict. But we know,